The Air Force declared her dead 3 years ago. But when an F-22 pilot began his final 30-second countdown to eject over the Pacific, a woman in worn jeans stood up from seat 12F and said 2 words that stopped 8 elite pilots cold: Titan 1. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. Sarah Reeves looked like 1,000 other middle-aged women traveling alone that Tuesday morning. Worn Levi's that had seen better days, a faded University of Texas sweatshirt, brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail showing the first threads of silver. No makeup. No jewelry except a plain watch with a scratched face. She carried a canvas tote bag containing a dog-eared paperback thriller, a water bottle, and a pack of gum. She moved through Dallas, Fort Worth International Airport with the practiced anonymity of someone who perfected the art of being overlooked. At 42, Sarah had become a master of invisibility. The gate agent barely glanced at her boarding pass. The TSA officer waved her through without a second look. She boarded American Airlines Flight 891 to San Diego in the second group, found her window seat, 12F, and settled in with the efficiency of a frequent traveler. The teenager in 12E had earbuds in before Sarah even sat down, head already bobbing to music only he could hear. The businessman in 12D was absorbed in a spreadsheet, laptop balanced on the tray table before the flight attendant could tell him to put it away. Perfect. Exactly how Sarah preferred it. A flight attendant with kind eyes and tired smile paused at her row. "Can I get you anything before we take off?" "Coffee would be wonderful." "Black, please." "Of course, hon." The attendant moved on, not recognizing the woman in 12F. Why would she? Sarah Reeves looked like a tired mom heading home from visiting relatives. Maybe a businesswoman who'd chosen comfort over corporate attire. Certainly not anyone important. Nobody on that aircraft knew that 20 years ago, Colonel Sarah, Titan 1, Reeves had been the first female pilot to command an F-22 Raptor squadron in active combat. Nobody knew her call sign had become Air Force legend, whispered in fighter pilot bars from Nevada to Okinawa, studied in classified tactics courses, referenced in Pentagon briefings. Nobody knew that Sarah Reeves had flown 187 combat missions without losing a single wingman, that she'd pioneered air superiority tactics still taught at fighter weapons school, that she'd once landed a crippled F-22 on a carrier deck in a storm so violent every other aircraft had been grounded. Nobody knew that Titan 1 had been chosen because her squadron mates swore she could carry the weight of the entire war on her shoulders. And nobody knew that Sarah Reeves hadn't just retired from the Air Force 3 years ago, she'd walked away after her final mission ended in catastrophic failure. After her best friend and wingman, Captain Marcus "Prophet" Williams, had died in a fireball over Syria because Sarah had made a split-second decision that turned out to be wrong. After she'd returned to base alone, after she'd stood at attention while they folded the flag for Marcus's widow and infant daughter, after she'd locked herself in her quarters and made a vow that still echoed through her nightmares. Never again. Never touch aircraft controls again. Never put herself in a position where someone's life hung on her voice, her judgment, her skill. For 3 years, she'd kept that vow. Sarah taught physics and chemistry at Henderson High School in a small Texas town 70 miles from anywhere important. Her students knew her as the teacher who actually made science interesting, who brought liquid nitrogen to class for demonstrations, who stayed after school to help anyone struggling. Her neighbors knew her as the quiet woman who brought homemade cookies to block parties, who volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends, who kept to herself but always waved hello. She drove a 9-year-old Honda Civic. She lived in a modest rental house with a rescue dog named Einstein. She read paperback novels and graded papers and lived a life so ordinary it bordered on aggressively mundane. Her medals were in a storage unit, packed in a box she hadn't opened in 3 years. Her flight suit was buried in the back of her closet. Her Air Force ring stayed in a drawer. Titan 1 had died the day Marcus did. Or so she'd convinced herself. Flight 891 pushed back from the gate at 9:47 a.m., 17 minutes late because of a maintenance issue with the auxiliary power unit. Sarah didn't notice or care. She was 50 pages into her novel, a mediocre spy thriller that required no emotional investment, when the Boeing 737 lifted off runway 18R and climbed into brilliant Texas morning sky. The flight would take 2 hours and 43 minutes. Routine. Uneventful. Just how Sarah wanted it. She was wrong. 4 rows ahead of Sarah, in the premium economy section that the military had paid for because they were traveling on official orders, 8 F-22 Raptor pilots made the kind of controlled chaos only young warriors can create. They wore their dress blues, the dark uniform with silver buttons and squadron patches that drew respectful nods from other passengers, and they carried themselves with the particular swagger of fighter pilots who'd completed their first combat deployment and survived to tell about it. Captain Derek Mason sat in the aisle seat of row 8, his long legs cramped even in the extra legroom section. At 28, he was the flight lead for this group, responsible for getting them to the San Diego Air Show where they'd participate in a demonstration for the public and recruiting drives. He had the easy confidence of someone who'd been good at everything his entire life, high school quarterback, Air Force Academy valedictorian, top of his class at fighter weapons school. Flying the F-22 Raptor felt like destiny to Derek Mason. "You nervous about the demo?" asked Captain Lisa Chen from the seat beside him. She was checking her phone obsessively, even though it was in airplane mode. "Nah. We've practiced the routine 1,000 times. It'll be flawless." Derek grinned. "Besides, how often do we get to show off for civilians? Let 'em see what their tax dollars buy." Lieutenant Marcus Wright, no relation to Sarah's lost wingman, though the name made her hands tighten on her book when she'd overheard the introductions during boarding, leaned over from the row ahead. "You guys hear about the vintage F-22 they're displaying? Supposedly one of the first production models. My dad said watching those early Raptors fly was like watching magic." "Before our time," Derek said. "Hell, we were in elementary school when they first deployed." "Speaking of before our time," said Captain James Rodriguez, twisting around from row 7, "you ever hear about Titan I?" Sarah's breathing stopped. She didn't look up from her book, but her eyes had ceased tracking the words. Derek nodded enthusiastically. "My weapons school instructor talked about her. Well, about the legend. He said Titan I flew 187 combat missions without losing a single wingman. Pioneered half the tactics we use now." "Bullshit," said Lieutenant Amy Foster, the youngest of the group at 24. "Nobody's that good. That's got to be one of those legends they tell to motivate us. Like that story about the pilot who supposedly landed on the highway to save a school bus." "That actually happened," Lisa interjected. "Different pilot. But Titan I. I don't know. Some of the old-timers swear she was real." Derek's expression grew serious. "My instructor, Major Phillips, he retired last year, he said he flew with her once. Transport mission, nothing fancy, but he said watching her fly was like watching Mozart conduct. She didn't just understand the aircraft, she understood physics itself. He said she could feel air currents, predict turbulence, know what the enemy would do before they did it." Marcus snorted. "Come on. That's impossible." "Is it?" Derek leaned forward, voice dropping into storytelling mode. "Phillips told me about a mission in 2004. Titan I was leading a 4-ship into contested airspace, supposed to provide air cover for a rescue operation. Intel said no enemy aircraft in the area. She didn't buy it. Positioned her squadron differently than the mission briefing called for. Her CO nearly grounded her for deviation. Then 6 enemy fighters appeared exactly where she'd predicted, and because she'd repositioned, her squadron was in perfect attack position. They splashed all 6 without taking a single hit. Without her instinct, that rescue team would have been slaughtered." Silence fell over the young pilots. These were the kinds of stories that shaped them, the legends that made them want to be better. "So what happened to her?" Amy asked quietly. "If she was that good, why isn't she still flying?" Derek shrugged. Nobody knows for sure. Philip said she disappeared around 2006 or 2007. Some people say she died in classified missions. Some say she went to work for defense contractors. Some say she just walked away. You don't walk away from being that good, James said firmly. Not possible. In seat 12F, Sarah's hands trembled slightly. She forced them still, forced her breathing to remain steady. They were talking about a ghost. A legend. Someone who didn't exist anymore. Let them keep believing that. I think it's probably bullshit, Amy said after a moment. A myth they created to inspire female recruits. No offense, Lisa. Lisa rolled her eyes. None taken. But I don't know, my mom flew F-16s in the 90s, and she said she met Titan I once. Said she was real, and she was everything the legends claimed. Your mom met her? Derek sat up straighter. What was she like? Mom said she was quiet. Intense. Not arrogant like you'd expect from someone that good. She said Titan I walked into a room and every pilot in it shut up and listened. Not because of rank, she was a captain at the time, but because she radiated competence. Like, you just knew this was someone who could save your life. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. She remembered that day, remembered meeting a young F-16 pilot named Jennifer Chen. Remembered giving her advice about managing fear in combat, about trusting your training, about never leaving your wingman. She'd failed to follow her own advice when it mattered most. Well, whoever she was, she's gone now, Marcus said, settling back into his seat. Probably teaching at the academy or pushing papers at the Pentagon if she's even alive. Those legends never survive reality. She probably wasn't half as good as the stories claim. Derek shook his head slowly. Phillips never lied. Never exaggerated. If he said she was that good, she was that good. The conversation drifted to other topics, the air show routine, dinner plans in San Diego, gentle mockery of each other's flying quirks. The young pilots laughed and joked, bright and alive and confident in their immortality. Sarah returned to her book, but the words blurred. She could feel the weight of her old call sign like a physical presence, a ghost sitting in the seat beside her, waiting. She pushed it away. She'd made her choice. That life was over. The flight attendant brought her coffee. Sarah thanked her and took a sip, focusing on the bitter warmth, on the mundane present instead of the legendary past. Outside the window, cumulus clouds drifted past at 37,000 feet, and Sarah Reeves tried very hard not to remember what it felt like to fly among them. The first sign of trouble came at 11:04 a.m., 47 minutes into the flight. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, professionally calm but with an undertone that made experienced travelers look up. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez from the flight deck. If there are any active-duty military personnel aboard, particularly Air Force, please press your call button immediately. We have an urgent situation requiring military communications support. The F-22 pilots exchanged glances. Derek's hand shot up, pressing the button. Around the cabin, a few other call buttons lit up, an Army sergeant in row 15, a Navy officer in business class. A flight attendant hurried down the aisle to Derek. Are you the fighter pilots? Yes, ma'am. 422nd Fighter Squadron. What's wrong? Her voice dropped. The captain received an emergency military frequency broadcast. Someone's in trouble. He needs help relaying information, but our radio equipment isn't designed for military comm protocols. He thinks you might be able to help. Derek was already unbuckling his seatbelt. His 7 squadron mates followed. They moved forward as a unit, drawing curious stares from passengers. Sarah watched them go, her jaw tightening. Military emergency. Her hand gripped her armrest harder than necessary. Probably nothing. Training exercise. Equipment test. Nothing that concerned her. But her instincts, those instincts she tried to bury for 3 years, were screaming warnings. In the forward galley, the captain had patched the emergency military frequency through to the aircraft's PA system, using a jury-rigged connection that fed the signal through the cabin speakers at low volume. The sound quality was terrible, buried in static and distortion, but the words were unmistakable. Mayday, this is Viper 3, experiencing total hydraulic failure at 28,000 feet. Derek's blood went cold. He grabbed the handset the flight attendant offered him. Viper 3, this is Captain Mason, 422nd Fighter Squadron. We're aboard a civilian aircraft attempting to relay. What is your position and aircraft type? Static roared. Fragments of words, 22 out of, Eglin, complete system failure, losing altitude. An F-22 with total hydraulic failure. Derek's mind raced through the implications. The Raptor's fly-by-wire system depended on hydraulics. Without them, the aircraft was a 65,000-pound brick falling out of the sky. Lisa leaned close. Can we reach anyone? Air traffic control. His base. The civilian radio isn't strong enough. Derek keyed the mic again. Viper 3, we're on a limited radio. I need you to boost your signal if possible. Can you reach your base directly? More static. Then, heartbreakingly clear, negative. Too far out. Radio's intermittent. The voice broke, young and terrified. I'm going to have to eject. Aircraft unresponsive. I've got maybe 2 minutes before I lose all remaining systems. The F-22 pilots crowded around the radio looked at each other with shared horror. They all knew what ejecting from a failing aircraft meant, survival chances that dropped dramatically with every complication. And they were listening to it happen, unable to help, separated by hundreds of miles and stuck on a passenger jet. Viper 3, stay with the aircraft as long as safely possible, Derek said, forcing his voice to stay calm and authoritative. We're trying to establish better communications. What's your hydraulic status? Are you getting any control response? Negative on controls. Total failure. Throttle only. I'm trying to, static swallowed the words. When the voice returned, it was barely audible, can't hold altitude, going down. Marcus had his phone out, trying to find the frequency range. We need to boost this signal somehow. The civilian transceiver is compressing the bandwidth. We're only getting fragments. James was already pulling up emergency protocols on his tablet. Even if we could hear him clearly, what can we do? We can't talk him through a hydraulic failure from here. We have to try. Derek keyed the mic again. Viper 3, listen to my voice. You have emergency procedures for this scenario. Have you attempted manual reversion? Static. Then, attempted. No response. Systems totally dead. Emergency backup systems. Already tried. Nothing. It's like the aircraft is paralyzed. I can't, the pilot's voice cracked. God, I don't want to punch out. Not like this. Amy moved closer to the radio. Ask him about flight controls. Even with hydraulic failure, there should be some mechanical linkage. Derek relayed the question, but the response was fragmented, impossible to understand clearly. The civilian radio simply wasn't designed for this kind of precision military communication. We're losing him, Lisa said, frustration and fear mixing in her voice. The signal's degrading. Even if we could give him instructions, he probably can't hear us clearly enough to follow them. In the galley, the mood was desperate. 8 of the Air Force's best pilots, listening to a fellow aviator dying, unable to do anything but bear witness. The flight attendants stood back, faces pale, knowing they were hearing someone's final moments. Through the static, the dying pilot's voice emerged one more time, crystal clear for just a moment, if anyone can hear me. I have a wife. Baby daughter. 3 months old. Her name is Emma. Please tell them. Static swallowed the rest. In seat 12F, Sarah's eyes were closed, her paperback forgotten in her lap. Her breathing had become shallow and rapid. She could hear every word through the thin aircraft walls, the PA system carrying the desperate transmission throughout the cabin. She knew that fear in the young pilot's voice. She'd heard it before, 20 years ago, in her best friend's final transmission. Prophet, I'm hit bad. Hold on, Marcus. I'm coming for you. No time. Systems failing. Sarah, tell my wife. Don't you dare, Prophet. Don't you fucking dare. And then the fireball. The silence. The endless, echoing silence where her wingman's voice should have been. Sarah's hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. 3 years of carefully constructed normalcy was crumbling around her because a stranger was dying and she was listening to it happen. Just like before. Just like Marcus. In the galley, Derek tried again, Viper 3, if you can hear me, we're working on better communication. Hold on. Just hold on. Static. He's not responding, James said quietly. He might have already ejected. Or the radio finally failed completely. Marcus's voice was hollow. Either way, we can't help him. Derek slammed his fist against the galley wall in frustration. There has to be something. We can't just listen to him die. We're pilots, not magicians, Amy said, though her voice was thick with unshed tears. Without proper equipment, without being there, we can't. The PA crackled. Through the static, weaker now, emergency beacon activated. This is Viper 3. Ejecting in 30 seconds. To whoever's listening, tell Emma her daddy loved her. Silence filled the galley. The terrible silence of inevitability. Then, quiet but unmistakable, a woman's voice from the cabin, let me through. The pilots turned. A woman in a faded sweatshirt and jeans was standing at the galley entrance, her face pale but her eyes burning with an intensity that seemed to light the narrow space from within. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but, Derek began. Your frequency bandwidth is too narrow. Sarah's voice was steady, professional, completely different from the quiet civilian who'd boarded 3 hours ago. The civilian radio is compressing your signal. You need to patch through the aircraft's emergency transponder and modulate manually. The controls are behind that panel. She pointed without hesitation at an access panel the pilots hadn't even noticed. It will take me about 15 seconds to reroute the signal properly. Derek stared at her. Ma'am, with all respect, this is a military emergency, and we need. Sarah's eyes locked on his, and Derek felt his words die in his throat. He'd seen that look before, in his instructors, in combat commanders, in the rare few pilots who transcended skill and become something more. Captain Mason, Sarah said quietly, you have approximately 20 seconds before that pilot ejects from an aircraft he might be able to save. I can fix your communication problem. Or you can waste time questioning me, and we both get to listen to him die. Your choice. Something in her absolute certainty made Derek step aside. Do it. Sarah moved into the galley with practiced efficiency, like she'd done this 1,000 times. Her hands went to the access panel, opening it without fumbling. She found the emergency communication controls instantly, bypassing safety locks with movements too quick to follow. Her fingers danced across settings that shouldn't have been accessible to civilians, adjusting frequencies with the precision of someone who'd spent years working with military radio equipment. The F-22 pilots watched in stunned silence as this ordinary-looking woman accomplished in 12 seconds what they couldn't have done in 20 minutes. Sarah picked up the handset, made a final adjustment to the frequency, and when she spoke, her voice had transformed completely, calm, commanding, carrying the weight of absolute authority. Viper 3, this is Titan 1. Level your wings. Disengage autopilot override. Switch to manual trim immediately. The static cleared like a curtain lifting. Complete silence filled the galley, the kind of silence that follows a thunderclap. Then, through perfect clarity, a voice barely above a whisper, Titan 1. That's impossible. Derek felt his world tilt. Behind him, Lisa gasped. Marcus breathed, oh my God. The woman in the faded sweatshirt, ordinary, anonymous, invisible, keyed the mic again, and her voice was steel, Viper 3, I don't have time for your disbelief. You have approximately 90 seconds before you lose all remaining hydraulic pressure and the aircraft becomes completely unresponsive. Do exactly what I tell you, exactly when I tell you, and you go home to Emma tonight. Deviate by 1 degree, and you die. Do you understand me? A pause. Then, firm and focused, yes ma'am. Titan 1, I copy. I'm ready. Good. Sarah's eyes closed briefly, and when they opened, she was somewhere else, not in a civilian aircraft galley, but in a cockpit 20 years ago, talking herself through an impossible situation that she'd survived through skill and instinct and sheer refusal to die. Now listen carefully, Viper 3. What I'm about to teach you isn't in any manual because I wrote the procedure after my own hydraulic failure over Iraq in 2003. The Air Force classified it for years because it works, and they didn't want enemy forces to know pilots could survive these scenarios. Are you with me? Yes ma'am. I'm with you. Good. First, confirm your altitude and airspeed. 22,000 feet. 420 knots, descending at 1,200 feet per minute. Sarah's mind was already calculating trajectories, energy states, the complex physics of a crippled aircraft falling through sky. Too fast. You're bleeding energy in the descent. You need that energy. Throttle back to 70%. Do it now. Throttle to 70%. Done. Your rate of descent will steepen, but your airspeed will stabilize. This is counterintuitive, but trust me. What's your hydraulic pressure reading? Main system 0. Backup system reading 5% and dropping. That 5% is your lifeline, and it's going to 0 within 90 seconds. Before that happens, I need you to do something that's going to feel completely wrong. Are you ready? Yes ma'am. Good. Sarah opened her eyes, and the F-22 pilots watching her saw something they'd never seen before, a human being operating at a level of focus that seemed almost superhuman. Viper 3, you're going to take that dying backup system and use it to mechanically lock your control surfaces in a specific configuration. It's a one-shot procedure. Once you do it, the aircraft will be trimmed for a specific flight profile, and you'll have no ability to change it. But it will give you stable flight long enough to reach a runway. Do you understand what I'm saying? You're telling me to freeze my controls. Exactly. Your hydraulic failure has disabled powered flight controls, but you still have emergency mechanical linkage to your horizontal stabilizers and rudder. With your remaining hydraulic pressure, you're going to position those surfaces to give you stable flight at 250 knots, then lock them mechanically. After that, you fly the aircraft entirely with throttle and weight distribution. It's going to be like flying a paper airplane, you can't turn it, you can only point it and manage energy. Derek realized his mouth was hanging open. He'd never heard of this technique. None of them had. Titan 1, how do I lock the surfaces mechanically? And Sarah began walking him through it, step by impossible step. For the next 7 minutes, Sarah Reeves disappeared into a place beyond the physical aircraft. She was in 2 places at once, standing in the galley of a civilian airliner, and sitting in the cockpit of an F-22 Raptor 22 years ago, hydraulic fluid spraying across her canopy, controls dead in her hands, death coming at 600 miles per hour. She remembered every detail of that day. The way her hands had moved across the emergency panels. The sequence of mechanical overrides she'd discovered through desperation. The calculations she'd done in her head because her displays were dead. The feel of the aircraft responding to throttle alone, like riding a wild horse with no reins. She'd survived. She'd pioneered a technique that the Air Force had quietly added to emergency procedures, though they'd never publicized who'd developed it. And now, 2 decades later, she was teaching it to a pilot she'd never met, guiding him through the same dance with death that she'd performed alone over enemy territory. Viper 3, reach down to your left console. There's an access panel marked Emergency Flight Controls. It's got a red safety cover. Open it. I've got it. Cover's off. You're going to see 3 mechanical levers. They're spring-loaded, so they'll resist you. The levers control direct mechanical linkage to your stabilizers and rudder. In a normal hydraulic failure, they'd be useless because you'd have no fine control. But we're not looking for fine control. We're looking for stable configuration. Are you with me? I'm with you. First lever, marked H-stab, that's your horizontal stabilizer. I need you to position it at exactly 7 degrees nose-down trim. There's a mechanical gauge next to the lever. Watch it carefully. Moving to 7 degrees set. Lock it. There's a pin on the right side of the lever. Locked. Good. Now your rudder, middle lever, marked RUD. This is critical, Viper 3. Your rudder is your only steering. I need you to position it at exactly 2 degrees right. Not 1 degree. Not 3 degrees. Exactly 2. That's going to compensate for your engine torque and keep you flying straight when you throttle up. Do you understand? 2 degrees right rudder. I understand. The young pilot's voice was steady now, focused. He'd stopped thinking about ejecting. He'd stopped thinking about Emma. He was a pure instrument, executing commands with absolute precision. Setting 2 degrees set. Lock it. Locked. Outstanding. Third lever, trim, that's your overall pitch trim. This one's tricky because it interacts with your throttle settings. I need you to set it at 3 degrees nose up. That's going to feel wrong because you're already nose down from the stabilizer setting, but trust the math. 3 degrees nose up on trim, set. Locked. Sarah's hands were shaking, but her voice remained rock steady. Perfect. Now you're locked into a stable configuration. Your aircraft is now essentially a powered glider. You cannot turn. You cannot adjust pitch. All you can do is manage your energy state through throttle and weight distribution. What's your current altitude? 18,000 feet. Rate of descent is 800 feet per minute. Airspeed 380 knots. Too fast still. You're going to overshoot any runway at that speed. I need you at 250 knots, which means shallower descent. Throttle up to 85%. 85%. Titan 1, I'm worried about fuel. I'm showing 30 minutes remaining. You'll only need 15. I'm going to put you on the ground at Edwards Air Force Base. It's the closest suitable runway, and with your locked controls, you need long and wide. Edwards fits perfectly. In the galley, Captain Mason had his phone out, pulling up a map. Edwards was 180 miles from the approximate position the pilot had transmitted. At F-22 cruise speed, it was possible. Barely. Sarah continued, Viper 3, what's your heading? Current heading 275 degrees. Sarah's mind calculated instantly. You're 10 degrees north of optimal track to Edwards. Here's the problem, you can't turn. But you can yaw. I'm going to teach you how to use weight distribution and throttle differential to induce a yaw without turning. Weight distribution. In an F-22. Your fuel is distributed across multiple tanks. Right now, you're roughly balanced. But if you transfer fuel to your right side tanks, you'll create a weight imbalance that will induce a right yaw. Combined with throttle modulation, I can walk you through a 10-degree course correction over the next 5 minutes. It's going to be gradual, and it's going to feel unnatural, but it works. Derek looked at Lisa. She mouthed silently, how does she know this? Sarah was already walking the pilot through the fuel transfer procedure, explaining how to use the manual fuel management controls that most pilots never touched. Her instructions were specific, technical, the kind of deep systems knowledge that only came from years of emergency training or actual emergencies. Transfer 500 pounds from left main to right auxiliary. Do it slowly, quick transfer will destabilize you. Transferring now. I can feel it, the aircraft is starting to slide right. Good. That's the yaw. Now, as you yaw, your velocity vector is changing. You need to compensate with left rudder pressure, except you can't because your rudder is locked. So instead, you're going to pulse your throttle. Quick reduction to 70% for 2 seconds, then back to 85. The asymmetric thrust during the reduction will counter the yaw slightly, giving you controlled drift instead of spin. The young pilot did as instructed. Through the radio, they could hear the change in engine pitch as he throttled back, then up again. It's working. My heading is drifting right. 277 degrees now. Perfect. Continue the fuel transfer. Another 300 pounds right side. Same throttle pulse every 15 seconds. For the next 3 minutes, Sarah guided him through the delicate dance of using fuel weight, throttle pulses, and locked control surfaces to induce a gradual course change. It was aviation jazz, improvisation built on deep knowledge, instinct married to physics, impossible made routine. Heading 285 degrees, Viper 3 reported. On course for Edwards. Excellent. Now we wait. Maintain current altitude, you're at 16,000 feet. Don't descend further until I tell you. We need to manage your energy budget carefully. What's your fuel? 24 minutes remaining. More than enough. Edwards is 14 minutes away at your current speed. Sarah paused, and when she spoke again, her voice had softened slightly. Viper 3, you're doing beautifully. You should be proud. Ma'am, I'm just doing what you tell me. You're the one performing miracles here. In the galley, the 8 F-22 pilots were watching Sarah like she was glowing. This wasn't just expert instruction, this was artistry. Every word she spoke, every calculation she made, every technique she described came from a well so deep they couldn't see the bottom. James leaned close to Derek. Who is she? Derek's voice was barely a whisper. Titan 1. It's really her. It's actually her. Amy was recording everything on her phone, understanding that they were witnessing something that would be talked about for generations. Sarah checked her watch. Viper 3, in approximately 2 minutes, you're going to start your descent for Edwards. The base will have heard your emergency transmission by now, and they'll have cleared the runway. But you need to understand, you're going to come in hot and fast. Your locked controls mean you can't flare normally. This landing is going to be harder than anything you've trained for. I understand, ma'am. No, I don't think you do. Listen carefully. Your touchdown speed is going to be around 220 knots, that's 80 knots above normal. You're going to hit the runway like a meteor. Your landing gear might collapse. The aircraft might break apart. You need to be mentally prepared to eject the instant you touch down if the landing goes bad. Do you understand? Silence. Then, yes ma'am. I understand. But if you do exactly what I tell you, if you trust me completely, you're going to walk away from this. I've done this landing. I survived it. You will too. Titan 1, may I ask you something? Go ahead. How old were you when you did this? When you survived hydraulic failure and landed the way you're teaching me? Sarah's face went very still. I was 24. First deployment. Scared out of my mind. Flying on instinct and prayers. And now you're teaching me. Saving my life. Thank you doesn't seem adequate. Thank me by landing safely. That's all the gratitude I need. Sarah checked her watch again. Okay, Viper 3. It's time. Start your descent. Throttle back to 60%. Throttle to 60%. Beginning descent. Your rate of descent is going to be approximately 1,500 feet per minute. That's steep, but your locked stabilizer trim will keep you stable. Don't fight it. Trust the configuration. Trusting the configuration. Over the next 8 minutes, Sarah guided him down from 16,000 feet. The mathematics of the descent filled her mind: energy management, velocity decay, altitude loss rate. She was calculating dozens of variables simultaneously, adjusting instructions based on his reported parameters, flying the aircraft through his hands. At 5,000 feet, she said, call your altitude every 1,000 feet. 4,000. Throttle to 55%. 55%. 3,000 feet. Sarah's voice remained perfectly calm, though her heart was hammering. Good. You should have visual on Edwards now. Call it when you see the runway. I see it. Straight ahead. God, it looks far. It's closer than it looks. Your perception is distorted because you're coming in high and fast. Trust your instruments, not your eyes. 2,000 feet, throttle to 50%. 50%. 2,000 feet. You're doing perfectly. At 1,000 feet, I need you to do something counterintuitive. You're going to throttle up to 70% for exactly 3 seconds, then cut to 30%. This will give you a brief energy spike followed by rapid deceleration. It's going to feel like you're falling out of the sky. You're not. You're bleeding off excess speed. Understood. 1,000 feet, throttling up to 70. The engine roared through the radio. 3 seconds. Then, cutting to 30. Call your altitude every 100 feet now. 900. 800. 700. Viper 3, at 500 feet, throttle to 40% and hold it. That's your landing power setting. Do not touch the throttle again until you're on the ground. 600. 500, throttle to 40%. Holding. 400 feet. I see the runway. I'm lined up. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. This was it. The moment where physics and skill and luck intersected. Viper 3, listen to me very carefully. At 100 feet, your aircraft is going to want to balloon. The ground effect will create lift under your locked stabilizers. Do not panic. Let it happen. The balloon will bleed off another 10 knots of airspeed. Then you're going to settle hard. Very hard. When you hit, keep your hands off the stick. If you try to control it, you'll overcorrect and cartwheel. Let the aircraft do what it wants. Your only job is to keep the wings level with throttle adjustment. Left engine increases, aircraft yaws left. Right engine increases, aircraft yaws right. Can you do that? I can do that. 300 feet. Outstanding. Remember, on touchdown, immediate max braking. You're going to use every inch of that runway. 200 feet. Runway looks good. 100 feet. The radio filled with the roar of engines, the howl of wind, the grinding vibration of an aircraft approaching its limits. Then impact. The sound through the radio was catastrophic: screeching metal, explosive roar, the bang 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 of landing gear hitting concrete at 220 knots. Every pilot in the galley flinched. Sarah gripped the handset so hard her knuckles went white. Talk to me, Viper 3. Report status. Static. Grinding noise. The scream of tires disintegrating. Then, on the ground. Braking. Aircraft intact. Oh God, I'm using all the runway. That's normal. Keep braking. Don't do anything else. 20 seconds of the most violent sounds any of them had ever heard through a radio. Then, finally, blessedly, stopped. I'm stopped. Titan 1, I'm I'm on the ground. I'm safe. The aircraft is, his voice broke. I'm alive. The galley erupted. The 8 F-22 pilots cheered, hugged each other, shouted with joy and relief. Flight attendants who'd been listening in the background cried openly. Passengers throughout the cabin who'd been following the drama through hushed whispers and updates applauded. Sarah simply closed her eyes and let out a breath she'd been holding for 22 years. Viper 3, this is Titan 1. You did beautifully. You should be very proud. Now shut down your engines and wait for rescue crews. And when you get home tonight, you hold Emma and you tell her about the day her daddy danced with Physics and won. Yes ma'am. Titan 1, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life. You saved your own life by trusting and executing. I just gave you the map. You walked the path. Sarah paused, and her voice grew softer, almost wistful. Go home to your family, Viper 3. That's all the thanks I need. Yes ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much. Sarah handed the radio back to the flight attendant and turned to leave the galley, but Captain Mason blocked her path gently. Ma'am, Colonel, I don't even know what to call you. Derek's voice was thick with emotion. That was the most incredible thing I've ever witnessed. It was just emergency procedure, Captain. No. Lisa stepped forward. That was not procedure. That was mastery. That was genius. Sarah shook her head. I should get back to my seat. You're really her. Marcus was staring at her with something approaching reverence. You're actually Titan 1. The legend. I'm a high school teacher from Texas who used to fly. That's all. That's not all, James said quietly. You just saved a man's life using techniques nobody else in the world knows. Techniques you pioneered. I'm tired, Sarah interrupted, and suddenly she looked exhausted, emotionally drained, like she'd just run a marathon. Please excuse me. The pilots parted to let her through, but as she passed, each one touched their hand to their heart in an informal salute, the gesture pilots use to honor fallen comrades, or legends. Sarah made it back to seat 12F and sat down heavily. Her hands were still shaking. The teenager in 12E was staring at her with wide eyes, having heard everything. The businessman in 12D had stopped working entirely. That was amazing, the teenager breathed. You're like a superhero. Sarah managed a weak smile. Just someone who used to know how to do a job, helping someone who's currently doing that job. Nothing heroic about it. But the word had already spread through the cabin. Passengers kept glancing back at her. The quiet woman in 12F wasn't invisible anymore. For the remaining hour of the flight, Sarah stared out the window at clouds and sky that she'd once ruled, and tried not to think about how good it had felt to be Titan 1 again, even for just a few minutes. Tried not to think about how the ghost she'd buried had risen at the first call. Tried not to wonder if she'd ever really left the sky at all. When American Airlines Flight 891 touched down at San Diego International Airport at 1:47 p.m., Sarah Reeves hoped desperately that she could simply deplane normally, collect her rental car, and disappear into her planned quiet weekend visiting a friend from college. That hope died the moment the aircraft reached the gate. Through the window, Sarah saw them, a formation of uniformed officers standing at attention on the jetway. At the front, a two-star general in service dress uniform, flanked by a full honor guard. Behind them, news cameras and reporters who'd somehow learned what happened mid-flight. Oh no, Sarah breathed. The captain's voice came over the PA, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest on board today. I've been informed that the United States Air Force has requested permission to honor one of our passengers. Colonel Sarah Reeves, on behalf of your grateful nation and everyone on this aircraft, thank you for your service. You saved a life today. The cabin erupted in applause. Every passenger stood. The young pilots from rows 7 and 8 stood at rigid attention, saluting. Sarah wanted to sink through the floor. Ma'am, the general has requested you deplane first, a flight attendant said gently. If that's okay with you. Sarah closed her eyes. She could refuse. She could sit here until everyone else left, could try to slip away in the crowd. But she knew military protocol. Refusing would be disrespectful to the young pilot she'd saved, to the service she'd given half her life to the uniform she still carried in her heart even after 3 years. She stood. Collected her bag. Walked down the aisle between passengers who pressed back to give her room, many reaching out to touch her shoulder or arm in gratitude and respect. At the aircraft door, she paused. Stepped into the jetway. The general snapped to attention. His honor guard followed. As one, they rendered a salute that could have been regulation textbook. Sarah, in civilian clothes, couldn't return it. But she stood straight, shoulders back, chin up, the bearing of a warrior even in jeans and a sweatshirt. The general held his salute for a long moment, then dropped it and stepped forward. Colonel Sarah Reeves. Call sign Titan 1. On behalf of the United States Air Force and every aviator who's ever worn the uniform, welcome back. Sir, I'm retired. I'm just a teacher now. General Marcus Hendricks, Sarah recognized him now, 2 stars where he'd worn captain's bars when they'd last met, smiled gently. A teacher who just saved one of my pilots using techniques you pioneered 2 decades ago. Titan 1, you may have taken off the uniform, but you never stopped being Air Force. Behind him, movement. A young man in a flight suit, face pale but eyes bright, pushed through the honor guard. Lieutenant Jake Morrison. Viper 3. He'd somehow gotten from Edwards to San Diego in the time it took her flight to land, probably a supersonic transport aircraft scrambled specifically to get him here. Ma'am. Jake's voice cracked. He tried to salute, but Sarah waved it off. None of that. How are you feeling? Alive. Because of you. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands, showed her a photo, a pretty woman holding an infant with dark hair and bright eyes. My wife Sarah. She just sent this. That's Emma. 6 months old. I get to see her tonight because of you. Sarah's carefully maintained composure finally cracked. Tears slipped down her face. I'm so glad. Ma'am, I need you to understand something. Jake's voice grew stronger. When I heard your call sign, when I heard Titan 1, I knew I was going to survive. Because that's what Titan 1 means. It means the pilot who never abandons her wingman. The pilot who brings everyone home. I didn't always, Sarah whispered. I lost someone. My best friend. I couldn't save him. General Hendricks stepped forward. Captain Marcus Williams. Syria, 2007. I know. I read the mission report. Sarah, that wasn't your fault. You made the right tactical decision. Marcus was hit by an enemy missile that Intel swore wasn't in the area. You couldn't have known. I was his flight lead. His survival was my responsibility. And for 186 missions before that, you never lost anyone. One loss in 187 missions isn't failure, Colonel. It's an unprecedented record that will probably never be equaled. The F-22 pilots from her flight had followed her off the aircraft. Captain Mason spoke up, Colonel Reeves, we study your missions at Fighter Weapons School. We memorize your tactics. But today, we learned what Titan 1 really means. It's not just skill. It's not just training. It's refusing to give up. It's being there when someone needs you, even 20 years later, even when you've walked away. That's the legend. Sarah looked around at the faces watching her, young pilots filled with admiration, the general with respect, Jake with gratitude that transcended words, reporters capturing every moment. I'm not a legend, she said quietly. I'm just someone who once knew how to fly, who happened to remember enough to help when someone needed it. No ma'am, Jake said firmly. You're someone who gave me my life back. Who gave Emma her father? Who showed me that the legends are real, and they're still out there, still watching over us even when we don't know it? General Hendricks produced something from behind his back, a shadow box containing an F-22 Raptor Squadron patch. Sarah's old patch, the 422nd Fighter Squadron she'd commanded 20 years ago. Mounted below it, a new inscription, Titan 1, the legend lives. This belongs to you, the general said. It always has. Sarah took it with trembling hands, looking at the patch she'd worn on 187 missions, through wars and peacetime, through triumph and tragedy. Sir, I walked away. I swore I'd never fly again, never put myself in that position again. You walked away from the aircraft, Hendricks said. But you can't walk away from who you are. Today proved that. The moment someone needed Titan 1, she was there. She never left. She was just, waiting. Behind the honor guard, the news cameras were recording everything. Tomorrow, Sarah knew, her face would be all over the news. Her anonymity, her carefully constructed quiet life, would be shattered. But as she looked at Jake Morrison's face, at the photo of little Emma, at the young pilots who'd witnessed her emergence from legend into reality, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in 3 years. Purpose. General, I'm not coming back to active duty. I can't. Teaching is important to me. My students need me. I understand. But Colonel, I have a request. The Air Force has a crisis. We're losing experienced pilots to commercial aviation and burnout. We're trying to rebuild institutional knowledge that's walking out the door. We need instructors at fighter weapons school. Not full-time, maybe 2 weeks a year. Guest instructor. Teaching emergency procedures. The techniques you pioneered. The instincts that saved Jake's life today. He paused. Would you consider it? Would Titan 1 consider one more mission? Not in the cockpit, but in the classroom. Passing on what you know to the next generation. Sarah looked at the 8 young F-22 pilots standing at attention, watching her with hope. She looked at Jake, holding his phone with his daughter's picture like a talisman. She looked at the shadow box in her hands, at the call sign she'd thought she'd buried forever. 2 weeks a year, she said slowly. Teaching only. No politics, no publicity tours. Agreed. And I go by Sarah Reeves. Not Colonel. Not Titan 1. I'm a teacher who used to fly. During those 2 weeks, you'll be Colonel Reeves, instructor. The rest of the year, you can be whoever you want. Hendricks extended his hand. Do we have a deal? Sarah hesitated for only a moment. Then she shook his hand firmly. We have a deal. The honor guard erupted in applause. The young pilots cheered. News cameras captured the handshake that brought Titan 1 back from the grave. Captain Mason approached with his squadron. Colonel, we fly the demonstration tomorrow at 1,400 hours. Would you consider watching from our tent? As our guest? Sarah smiled. I'd be honored. As the crowd dispersed and Sarah finally headed toward the terminal, Jake Morrison caught up with her. Ma'am, one more thing. Sarah, my wife, she wants to meet you. And Emma, we'd like to ask if you'd consider being her godmother. I know that's forward, but you gave her father back. You're already family. Sarah stopped walking. Turned to look at this young pilot who'd survived the impossible, who wanted to bind his daughter to her through more than just gratitude. I had a friend named Marcus, she said softly. His daughter would be about Emma's age now if he'd lived. I was supposed to be her godmother. I never got to fulfill that promise. Then fulfill it now, Jake said. Be Emma's. Please. Sarah looked at the phone again, at the infant girl who would grow up knowing her father because of a few minutes of radio guidance and 20 years of hard-won experience. Yes, she whispered. I would be honored. 3 months later, Sarah Reeves stood in front of her fifth-period physics class at Henderson High School. On the wall behind her, a new poster had appeared, a photograph of an F-22 Raptor in flight, with text reading, "Skill, Courage, Service. The Physics of Flight." Tommy Rodriguez, one of her brightest students, raised his hand. "Mrs. Reeves, is it true you were a fighter pilot?" After the news coverage, her students had discovered her past. She debated how to handle it, finally deciding that honesty was better than mystery. "A long time ago, yes." "Why'd you quit?" asked Maya Chen. "If you were so good, why'd you stop?" Sarah put down her chalk and turned to face the class. 26 teenagers watched her with genuine curiosity, not hero worship, just honest interest in their teacher's life. "I lost someone," Sarah said quietly. "My best friend. We were flying together, and he died. For a long time, I thought that meant I'd failed. That I should have done something different, been smarter, been better. So I walked away because I couldn't face that feeling again. But you came back," Tommy said. "We saw the news. You saved that pilot." "I didn't come back to flying. I helped someone who needed help." "That's different." "Is it?" Maya challenged. "You used everything you learned as a pilot. You saved a life with those skills. Isn't that still being a pilot?" Sarah considered this. "Maybe. Or maybe I learned that the skills we develop in one part of our lives don't disappear when that part ends. We carry them forward. They transform into new purposes." "So why'd you become a teacher instead of staying a pilot?" asked James Park from the back row. "Because teaching is saving lives too. Just differently." Sarah moved to the whiteboard, started drawing vectors and force diagrams. "Every time I help one of you understand physics, every time you grasp a concept that lets you see the world more clearly, I'm giving you tools. Tools to build things, understand things, maybe even save lives someday. That matters just as much as anything I did in a cockpit. But don't you miss it?" Tommy pressed. "Flying, I mean. Being a hero." Sarah smiled. "I was never a hero. I was good at my job, and I worked very hard to get better. But you know what? I worked just as hard at teaching. And the impact is just as important. Look around this room, I see future engineers, doctors, scientists, maybe even pilots. Every one of you is going to do something important with your life. If I can help you get there by teaching you to think clearly about how the world works, then I'm still serving. Just in a different uniform." Maya raised her hand again. "Can you tell us about the call sign?" "Titan 1. Titan was from Greek mythology, the Titans held up the world. My squadron gave me that call sign because they said I carried them through tough missions. I never liked it much. Made me sound more important than I was." "But you were important," James said. "You never lost anyone in 187 missions except one." "That's impossible." "It's not impossible. It's preparation meeting opportunity and luck being on your side. And I did lose someone, James. That's the part people forget when they talk about legends. The perfect record that wasn't perfect. The one failure that mattered more than all the successes." The classroom was silent. These teenagers, most of whom had never seen combat or loss or the weight of responsibility that came with life-and-death decisions, were trying to understand their teacher's complicated relationship with heroism. Finally, Maya said, "Mrs. Reeves, I think maybe you quit flying because you cared too much. Because losing one person hurt so bad that you couldn't risk it again. But you came back anyway when someone needed you. That's what makes you a hero. Not never losing anyone. But caring enough to try even when you're scared." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "When did you all get so wise?" "We have a good teacher," Tommy said with a grin. The bell rang. Students gathered their books, headed for the door, but several paused to say thanks or touch her shoulder as they left, the same gesture passengers on Flight 891 had made, the same gesture of respect and connection. When the classroom was empty, Sarah walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. In 3 weeks, she'd fly to Nevada for her first 2-week teaching rotation at Fighter Weapons School. She'd stand in front of elite pilots and teach them the emergency procedures she'd pioneered, the techniques that had saved Jake Morrison's life. But after those 2 weeks, she'd come back here. To Henderson High School. To teenagers who needed to learn that force equaled mass times acceleration, that momentum was conserved, that the laws of physics applied everywhere from ground level to stratosphere. Her phone buzzed. A text from Jake Morrison. Emma said, "Mama, today. Sending video. Also, Squadron wants to name our new F-22 Titan I in your honor. Thought you should know." Sarah smiled, typed back, "Congratulations on the word. Tell Emma I'm proud. As for the aircraft name, I'm honored. But make sure whoever flies it understands the responsibility. Titan I means bringing everyone home. Always. Understood. Love from all of us. Come visit when you can. Emma misses her godmother." Sarah looked at the photo she kept on her desk now, not prominently displayed, but there, her old squadron, 20 years younger, standing in front of their F-22s. Marcus Williams was on her left, arm around her shoulders, both of them grinning like idiots. Before the mission that ended him. Before Titan I became a legend. Before everything changed. "I'm still here, Marcus," she whispered. "Still trying to bring everyone home. Just using different tools now." In her canvas bag, the shadow box from the San Diego airport ceremony sat wrapped in a cloth. She'd hung it in her bedroom at home, where she saw it every morning and every night. A reminder of who she'd been, who she still was in ways that mattered more than call signs. Her next class would arrive in 5 minutes. Juniors, studying momentum and collision physics. She'd start with a demonstration, 2 marbles rolling toward each other, the transfer of energy, the beauty of conservation laws. She'd probably tell them about landing an F-22 with failed hydraulics, about understanding your aircraft's energy state, about the physics of impossible recoveries. Because that's what teaching was, taking the impossible and breaking it down into understandable pieces. Taking experience and transforming it into knowledge. Taking pain and loss and hard-won wisdom and passing it forward so others didn't have to learn the same lessons at the same terrible cost. Titan I had returned. Not to the cockpit, but to the classroom. And maybe, Sarah thought as students started filing in with their backpacks and questions and futures waiting to unfold, maybe that was the most important mission of all. 1 year later, Sarah Reeves sat in the observation tower at Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada, watching through binoculars as 8 F-22 Raptors executed a training exercise 40,000 feet above the desert. Beside her, General Hendricks watched the same exercise through his own binoculars. "They're using your dispersal pattern. The one you pioneered in that 2004 mission. Modified," Sarah noted. "They added a secondary reaction vector. That's smart, compensates for improved enemy detection systems. You taught them that modification. Last month." Sarah smiled. "They figured it out themselves. I just asked the right questions." On the radio, young pilots chattered call signs and tactical updates. Sarah recognized several voices, students from her first rotation, now instructors themselves, teaching the next generation. "Viper Squadron, this is Titan II. I have contact bearing 270, Angels 30, closing fast." Sarah's eyebrows rose. "Titan II." Hendricks grinned. "Captain Lisa Chen. From the flight where you saved Morrison." She petitioned to change her call sign. Said if she was going to teach emergency procedures based on your techniques, she should carry the name. Several others did the same. "There's a Titan III and Titan IV now. I'm not sure how I feel about that." "Feel honored." They're carrying your legacy forward. That's what legacy means, not just what you did, but what you inspired others to do. Below them, a door opened. Jake Morrison entered, carrying a toddler in a tiny flight suit with Emma embroidered on the chest. His wife Sarah followed, smiling. Godmother. Emma squealed, reaching for Sarah. Sarah took her goddaughter, settled her on her lap facing the window. Want to see Daddy's friends fly? Fly. Emma agreed enthusiastically. Jake stood beside them, watching the aerial ballet above. That's Viper 3, Lieutenant Davis. New call sign, same position. I'm training him. Yesterday, I walked him through your hydraulic failure procedure. He called it magic. It's physics. It's both. Sarah touched Sarah's shoulder. We're having another baby. Found out last week. If it's a girl, we want to name her Sarah. If that's okay with you. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. I would be so honored. But you should consider Marcus for a boy. After my friend. Marcus if it's a boy, Sarah agreed. Sarah if it's a girl. Legacy names. For the people who made our family possible. In Sarah's lap, Emma pointed at a contrail. Daddy? Not Daddy today. Daddy's here with you. But those are Daddy's friends. Protecting us. Like you, Emma said with the absolute certainty of a toddler. You protected Daddy. I helped. Daddy protected himself by being brave and smart. General Hendricks cleared his throat. Colonel, I have something to discuss with you. The Air Force wants to establish a permanent emergency procedures school. Advanced training for situations not covered in standard curriculum. They want to name it after you. The Reeves Institute for Advanced Flight Safety. You'd design the curriculum, train the instructors, but not be required to teach more than your current 2-week rotations. Sarah watched the F-22s wheel and dive and climb, pure physics transformed into art. I already have a job. Part-time consulting. Your teaching schedule wouldn't change. We'd build the program around your availability. Why me? Because you pioneered half these procedures. Because pilots trust the Titan I name. Because you've proven you can teach these skills. Sarah, in the year since Morrison's incident, hydraulic failures are down 70% because pilots are using your preventative maintenance protocols. The 3 failures that did occur. All pilots survived using techniques you taught. You're saving lives every day without even being in the air. Sarah looked down at Emma, then at Jake and Sarah, then back at the aircraft above. I need to think about it. Take your time. That evening, Sarah drove back to her hotel room and opened her laptop. She'd promised her students she'd answer their emails even while in Nevada, and her inbox was full. Mrs. Reeves, I used your force diagram technique on my SAT prep. Made physics problems so much easier. Thank you. Hey Mrs. R, just got accepted to Air Force Academy. Putting you down as inspiration in my entrance essay. Hope that's cool. Mrs. Reeves, I decided to major in aerospace engineering because of your class. You made me realize I could understand this stuff. Sarah read each message, responded to each one, and realized something profound. She was already running her own institute. Not for elite pilots, but for teenagers who needed someone to show them the world made sense, that complex things could be understood, that they were capable of more than they imagined. The Air Force wanted her name on a building. Her students wanted her in the classroom. She could do both. She typed an email to General Hendricks, I'll consult on curriculum design for the institute. I'll train instructors. But I won't reduce my teaching time. My students come first. If you can build the program around that constraint, I'm in. Then she opened a new document and started writing, Introduction to Advanced Flight Emergency Procedures, Chapter 1, The Physics of Impossible Situations. 3 years after walking away from aviation, Sarah Reeves had finally figured out what Titan 1 really meant. It wasn't about flying. It wasn't about combat. It wasn't even about the perfect record or the legendary missions. It was about refusing to let people fall. About catching them with knowledge, with skill, with the accumulated wisdom of hard experience. About being there when someone needed you, whether they were a pilot at 28,000 feet or a teenager struggling with Newton's laws. It was about carrying the weight. Not of the world, but of responsibility to the people who depended on you. The Titans of mythology held up the sky. Titan 1 held up anyone who needed help reaching it. Sarah stood at the front of her classroom, now designated Henderson High School Advanced Physics and Aviation Studies, a new program she developed that lets students learn physics through flight principles. The class had grown from 26 students to 60, split across 2 periods, with a waiting list. On the wall, new posters, F-22s and F-35s, commercial aircraft and experimental designs, diagrams of lift and thrust and drag and weight. Her students didn't just learn formulas, they learned how those formulas made metal fly. Mrs. Reeves. Tommy Rodriguez, now a senior, raised his hand. I got my private pilot's license last weekend. Used everything you taught us about energy management. Congratulations, Tommy. What's next? Air Force Academy. I want to fly F-22s. I want to be part of that legacy you talk about. Sarah smiled. Then work hard, stay humble, and never forget that your job is to bring everyone home. Always. After class, she checked her phone. A message from the Reeves Institute, graduation ceremony next month for first class. Request your attendance to present certificates. Also, Morrison's squadron received commendation for 0 incidents in 18 months using your protocols. You're saving lives, Colonel. Sarah looked around her empty classroom, at the equations on the whiteboards, at the student projects hanging on walls, at the futures taking shape in this ordinary room in an ordinary Texas town. She'd saved Jake Morrison from a falling aircraft. But how many students had she saved from never discovering what they were capable of? How many futures had she shaped by showing them that the complex could be understood, that fear could be overcome with knowledge, that they had power to change their worlds? That was the real legacy of Titan 1. Not the missions flown or the enemies defeated or the impossible landings survived. But the idea that you never stop serving. You never stop teaching. You never stop catching the people who fall. You just change the sky you operate in. Sarah gathered her papers, turned off the lights, locked her classroom door. Tomorrow she'd teach momentum. Next week, she'd fly to Nevada for her regular 2-week rotation. Next month, she'd stand as godmother at Emma's little brother Marcus's baptism. And through it all, she'd carry the weight. The weight of responsibility, of legacy, of all the people who looked to her for knowledge and guidance and the assurance that someone who'd survived impossible things believed they could too. Colonel Sarah, Titan 1, Reeves had returned from legend. And discovered she'd never really left. The mission had just evolved.